Okay, here's all you need to know about sex with the different attachment styles, and we're going to start with all of our favorite dismissive avoidant. Now, of course, attachment styles are on a spectrum, so not everyone is going to be exactly the same, but there are general commonalities with each attachment style. Because dismissive avoidants really struggle with vulnerability and intimacy, that bleeds into the sex life. Dismissive avoidants are just people like anyone else, so they can range in how their sex drive is, but they're still human. They still have a sex drive, they still long for connection, and when they meet you, they're interested in you, they're attracted to you, they want to be intimate. Probably noticed in the relationship with your dismissive avoidant partner that the sex life started as being really, really good, like super passionate, super fulfilling. You felt very connected to them. It was probably very frequent. The avoidant was probably initiating all the time. And then it kind of went like this as the relationship progressed. You may have also noticed that there were certain little things that the avoidant wasn't comfortable doing that like maybe someone else would be comfortable doing. So here's what's happening. Essentially, when the dismissive avoidant first meets you, all their barriers and walls are down. They feel free to just be whoever they want because you guys don't know each other yet. You're not requiring anything from them. You're not depending on them. You're not pressuring them about anything. They don't feel any shame. They're not disappointing you. Everything is easy. So you guys can just engage in sex and it can be fun and exciting. And the dismissive avoidant can kind of just like be whoever they want. Unfortunately, this honeymoon stage does not last forever. And once the relationship becomes real and you guys start building on that commitment and that foundation, you'll start noticing a change in the dismissive avoidant. The closer the two of you get in the relationship, probably the less sex you'll be having, as crazy as that sounds. So for us, or for people who are not DA, when we get closer to a partner, we have more desire for them. For a dismissive avoidant, it's actually the opposite because they feel so uncomfortable with vulnerability. So the more that you get to know them and they get to know you, they start to feel really scared to express themselves in that way. One thing about DAs is I really truly believe that because they do have so many walls up and they don't really prioritize or value vulnerability or intimacy, they think of sex as like a stress release, something you do to feel good and get a release. But for those of us who really long for deep connection, deep intimacy with our partner, we look at sex as like a loving act where two people are going to be intimate and get to know each other in a different way and take our time. And I think that DAs struggle with that. I think that they look at sex as like boom, boom, done. Because DAs kind of view this act as like something that they just want to do so they can get the pleasure out of it and that release, they oftentimes like don't really want to bother with anything else. And also those things might be hard for them to do because it requires them to be vulnerable. So those things might be kissing, making out, foreplay, KINKs, adding in like costumes, lingerie, stuff like that. DAs might have a really hard time with this stuff. So for kissing, that's two people coming together face to face, being as close as humanly possible. That's a really vulnerable thing to do. With foreplay, for someone who really craves emotional connection, foreplay is so important because you are your most vulnerable when you are doing those things. You're taking time to like pleasure the other person. You're really, really being vulnerable, offering pleasure to your partner, and they're giving it to you. And it really requires so much vulnerability that can be really tough for a DA. I also think they may not care about other things like lingerie, costumes, or anything extra because it's just like an added layer of shit that they like don't want to deal with. They just want to like get to the act. A couple other things that are interesting that I saw in the comments that I think are common. The first is that DAs will often initiate when you're sleeping. And the second is that DAs will often keep their eyes closed the whole time. The sleeping thing sounds like some weird KINK, but I really don't think that's the case when we're dealing with DAs. I think the reason that they initiate when you're sleeping is because there is way less vulnerability involved. You are not like fully awake. It's not like you're passed out. Like you wake up. You know what I mean? You wake up from your sleep, but you're still kind of like foggy, half asleep, half awake. You're not fully present and fully there with them in that moment as you would be if it was happening in the middle of the day. Someone said in the comments that they actually had more passionate sex with their avoidant partner when it was initiated during sleep. And that actually makes so much sense to me because the avoidant would have a lot more walls down. They would feel more comfortable to kind of let loose. The next thing is keeping the eyes closed. That would be another barrier to kind of prevent intimacy and vulnerability. Looking someone in the eyes is a very vulnerable thing to do. It's even hard for me during sex. Last thing I'll say is that when DAs start going like this with the sex life, when they start pulling back, they still have sexual desire. They still have impulses and urges because they're still human. It's not like those feelings are going away. Those feelings are just going away for you because they now feel too close to you. It's gotten too real and it's become harder for them to perform. But they still have those desires. And, you know, Avoidants have a very rich fantasy life, and so they will often turn to that fantasy life when they cannot really perform for their partner anymore. So a lot of avoidants might have issues with corn. They might subscribe to OFs. They might, dating apps, Instagram stories, cheating, or lots of things they will do because they feel more free in those moments to just let loose with their sexuality, where there's no commitment involved, no vulnerability, no intimacy involved. They can just kind of like get the urge out without having anyone requiring anything from them. Let me know if you guys had this experience, and make sure to follow me because I'm going to talk about fearful avoidance next.